A 12-year-old boy was alone in the national forest for his Eagle Scout test when he heard heavy boots crashing through the darkness. Then he saw it, a man running with a limp child in purple pajamas. For 67 hours, Declan tracked a kidnapper, stayed hidden, kept that 9-year-old alive with smuggled food and water, and built signal fires that finally brought 127 Hells Angels and the FBI to that cabin. What drove him wasn't just scout training, it was a promise. I won't leave you. And Declan keeps his promises. Subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. But before we continue, Declan was 12. He tracked a kidnapper for 67 hours. He gave away all his food, slept maybe 4 hours total, stayed when running would have been safer. Why? Because he promised a 9-year-old girl he wouldn't leave her, and a scout keeps his promises. Ask yourself, when was the last time you kept a promise that cost you something? I promised her I wouldn't leave. Scouts keep their promises. That's what Declan would say 67 hours later when they finally pulled Harper Reed out of that cabin alive. But on Friday night, he didn't know her name yet. He only knew what he saw. Declan had banked his campfire the moment he heard footsteps. His father had taught him that, when you don't know what's coming through the woods at night, you make yourself invisible first and assess second. He grabbed his red filter headlamp, the kind that doesn't destroy your night vision, and moved to the tree line at the edge of his clearing. 30 seconds of silence. Then the sound again. Closer now, maybe 200 yards out. The man came into view exactly 90 seconds later. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing jeans and a dark jacket that looked too thin for October in the mountains. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder, and in his arms, draped across both forearms like something broken, was a child, a little girl. She was small, maybe 8 or 9 years old, Declan guessed, with light brown hair that hung loose past her shoulders. She wore fleece pajamas, purple with unicorns. One of her white socks had fallen off somewhere between wherever she'd been taken and here. Her arms dangled, her head lolled against the man's chest. She wasn't moving. Declan's first thought, the one that hit him like cold water, was simple. That's not right. Parents don't carry unconscious children through the woods at night. Parents don't run through rough terrain in the dark, breathing like they're being chased, looking over their shoulders every 10 steps. Parents don't take kids in pajamas 3 miles from the nearest road. The man stopped once, maybe 40 yards from where Declan crouched behind a fallen hemlock. He adjusted his grip on the girl, shifted the backpack, checked behind him again, scanning the forest like he expected someone to be following. Then he muttered something Declan couldn't quite hear. Something about almost there and 1 more mile, and he kept moving. Declan didn't think. He just followed. His scout training took over. The tracking lessons his father had drilled into him since he was 8. The stalking exercises his troop practiced on weekend campouts. The skills that were supposed to be for finding deer trails and identifying animal prints, not for trailing a man who might be dangerous. Declan moved from tree to tree, staying 30 yards back, stepping where the ground was soft, avoiding dry branches. His heart hammered, his hands shook, but his feet knew what to do. The man moved northeast uphill into a part of the forest Declan hadn't explored yet. The terrain got rougher, limestone outcrops jutting through the soil. Dense thicket of rhododendron that forced them both to take winding paths. By full darkness, the man pulled out a flashlight, a cheap one that cast a weak yellow beam. Declan kept his red headlamp on its lowest setting and thanked God he'd listened when his scoutmaster said, "Red light doesn't give away your position." They walked, Declan following the man carrying, for 83 minutes, 1.7 miles, and then the man stopped. Declan dropped behind a moss-covered boulder and watched. There was a cabin. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by oaks maybe 50 yards ahead. The structure was old. Wooden walls with gaps between the boards, a tin roof orange with rust, one window with no glass, just an empty frame. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Nobody had used this place in years, maybe decades. The man approached the cabin, shouldered the door open, and disappeared inside. Declan counted to 30, then moved closer. He found a position behind a fallen log, 60 feet from the cabin's front wall, with a dense rhododendron bush giving him cover. From here, he could see straight through the empty window frame into the cabin's interior. The man was lighting a lantern, kerosene from the smell, and hanging it from a hook in the ceiling. The girl lay on the floor where he'd set her down. She stirred. Declan watched her head turn slightly, watched her hand twitch. She was waking up. The man crouched beside her and said something Declan couldn't hear from this distance. The girl's eyes opened. She tried to sit up. The man pushed her back down, not violently, but firmly, and spoke again. This time, Declan heard it. "Don't move." The girl's voice came next, thin and confused and terrified. "Uncle Travis, where am I? I want my daddy." "Uncle." Declan's stomach dropped. She knew him. This wasn't a stranger. This was family, which meant whatever was happening here was worse than Declan had thought. The man, Travis, grabbed a length of rope from his backpack. He pulled the girl to a sitting position, dragged over the only piece of furniture in the cabin, a wooden chair, paint peeling, one leg slightly shorter than the others, and forced her into it. She started crying. "You're hurting me. Please, I want to go home." Travis wrapped the rope around her wrists, pulled it tight behind the chair, wrapped it again around her ankles, binding them to the chair legs. She couldn't move. Then he gagged her, a piece of cloth tied around her mouth, cutting off her voice mid-sob. She could only make muffled sounds now, desperate and small. Travis stood. He paced. He ran his hands through his hair, and then he started talking. Declan couldn't look away. "You don't understand, do you?" Travis said. His voice was tight, bitter, like something that had been building pressure for years. "Your daddy, my brother, he ruined my life. 10 years ago, I had problems. Everyone has problems. I needed help, not judgment. But Brody," he told our father, "told him I was using drugs, told him I stole money." Travis stopped pacing, turned to face the girl. "And you know what Dad did? Kicked me out, disowned me, cut me out of the will. Everything went to Brody. The house, the money, the respect. Brody got the club, got the brotherhood, got everything." His voice dropped lower, and I got nothing. He knelt in front of her. His face was inches from hers. "Your daddy took my life, so I'm taking his." The girl shook her head frantically. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Travis pulled a phone from his pocket. "A burner," Declan guessed. He held it up. "I sent him a message 20 minutes ago. $387,000, 67 hours. That's what I told him. Pay up or she dies. No police or she dies." He stood again, turned away. "He thinks he can save you with money. He's wrong. I'm keeping the money and I'm killing you anyway because money won't fix what he did to me. Only losing you will make him feel what I felt." Declan's hands went numb. "You have 67 hours, Travis said, his voice flat now. "Clinical. That's it. Sunday morning. Whether he pays or not, you don't go home. And they'll never find you. This cabin's been forgotten for 15 years. By the time they search this deep, you'll be long buried." The girl, Harper, Declan thought, though he didn't know her name yet, shook her head behind the gag. Her whole body trembled. Travis checked his watch. Then he walked to the door. "I'm going to check the perimeter, set up some traps. Make sure nobody followed me. Don't go anywhere." He laughed at his own joke. Then he left. The lantern stayed burning. Harper stayed tied to the chair, crying silently, unable to scream. And Declan stayed hidden behind the log, his mind racing. He had his backpack. Inside it, water filter, iodine tablets, rope, first aid kit, fire starter, knife, compass, topographic map, emergency blanket, signal mirror, 6 granola bars, 2 packs of jerky, trail mix. Enough supplies for 48 hours, which was what his merit badge required. He had skills: fire building, water purification, navigation, tracking, signaling, wilderness first aid. He had a choice. He could run 3 miles back to the trailhead, maybe 90 minutes in the dark if he moved fast, find help, call police. His father was a park ranger. He'd know who to call, how to mobilize search and rescue. But by the time Declan got there, it would be late. By the time police organized a search party for a remote cabin with no trail access, it could be midnight. By the time they found this place, if they found it at all, in 500,000 acres of forest, it could be dawn. And if Travis heard sirens coming, if he suspected someone had discovered his location, he might move her. Or worse. Declan looked at his hands. They were shaking. He thought about his father's voice, the lessons he'd drilled into Declan since he was old enough to walk. Do the right thing, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He thought about the scout law. A scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean and reverent, helpful, brave. He looked at the cabin, at the little girl tied to a chair crying in the lantern light, and he made his decision. Declan pulled his journal from his pack, the waterproof notebook where he was supposed to document his survival decisions for the merit badge, and wrote 3 sentences by the glow of his red headlamp. I found a kidnapped girl. Her uncle is going to kill her in 67 hours. I'm not leaving her. Then he closed the journal, zipped it into his pack, and began planning. The first thing Declan did was mark the trail. He backtracked 100 yards from his observation post, moving carefully, quietly. Every 50 yards, he left a marker. A branch broken at eye level, the break pointing northeast toward the cabin. 3 rocks stacked in a cairn, the top rock pointing north. Bark stripped from a tree in a long vertical scar like a blaze on a hiking trail. He worked for 35 minutes, extending the marked trail a quarter mile toward the Deep Creek trailhead. When rescue came, when, not if, because Declan refused to believe if, they would follow these markers straight to the cabin. He was back at his observation post. Travis had returned. Through the window, Declan could see him lying on the floor near the door, using his backpack as a pillow. The lantern had been turned down to a low flicker. Harper was still tied to the chair. She'd stopped crying, but her head hung forward, exhausted, terrified. Declan ate 1 granola bar, drank a quarter of his water bottle, tried to think. He couldn't approach the cabin while Travis was inside. The man would hear. And even if Declan was quiet, what could he do? He was 12 years old and weighed 94 pounds. Travis was an adult, so Declan waited. He didn't sleep. At Saturday morning, Travis woke, stretched, and left the cabin. Declan timed it. 30 minutes. Declan moved fast. He crawled under the cabin, dirt cold against his stomach, spiderwebs catching in his hair. He moved toward the center of the structure, directly beneath where Harper sat, tied to the chair. The floorboards above him had gaps, inch-wide spaces between planks, enough to see through, enough to reach through if he was careful. Declan pressed his face close to a gap and whispered, "Hey." Harper's head jerked up. "Down here. Don't make a sound." She looked down, saw his eye peering up through the gap. Her eyes went wide. Declan whispered fast. "My name is Declan. I'm 12. I'm a Boy Scout. I was camping nearby. I saw him bring you here last night. I followed you. I know you're in danger. I'm going to help you." Harper made a muffled sound behind the gag. "I'm going to reach up and take the gag off for a minute, but we have to be quiet, okay?" She nodded frantically. Declan reached through the gap. His fingers just barely touched the cloth tied around her mouth. He worked at the knot, loosened it, pulled it down around her neck. Harper gasped for air. "What's your name?" Declan whispered. "Harper. Harper Reed." Her voice was, "My dad is Brody Reed. That man, that's my Uncle Travis. He's going to kill me. He said so. Please, please help me." "Your dad is looking for you," Declan said. "I promise. I'm leaving trail markers, broken branches, stacked rocks. So when they search, they'll find you. But I need you to stay strong. Can you do that? How long? I don't know. But I'm not leaving. I'm going to keep you alive until they get here. I'm going to bring you food and water every time he leaves. Okay?" Harper's eyes filled with tears. Okay. Declan pulled a water bottle from his pack, half full, filtered from the stream that morning, and passed it up through the gap. Harper grabbed it, drank desperately. He gave her a granola bar. She ate it in 4 bites. Then he pulled a piece of paper from his journal and wrote quickly, "Your dad loves you. Help is coming. Stay strong. Declan." He passed it through the gap. She clutched it. "I have to put the gag back on," Declan said. "I'm sorry, but if he finds it off, he'll know someone helped you. I'll come back. I promise." "Okay." Her voice was small, scared but steady. Declan reached up, retied the gag. Harper didn't fight. Then he heard footsteps. Travis was coming back. Declan scrambled backward through the dirt, replaced the floorboard, and sprinted into the trees. He reached the rhododendron cover 15 seconds before Travis walked back into the cabin. Declan crouched behind the log, breathing hard, heart slamming against his ribs. He'd just kept a promise, the first of many, and now the clock was ticking. 61 hours left. By noon Saturday, Declan had expanded his trail markers to cover nearly a mile of forest between the cabin and the main trailhead access road. He worked systematically, moving in careful arcs, ensuring that anyone searching from the north, east, or west would eventually intersect one of his marked paths. He also built his first signal fire. There was a ridgeline 600 yards east of the cabin, the highest point within a mile. Declan hiked to it, gathered armloads of green pine boughs and damp leaves, and constructed a fire that would produce thick white smoke visible for miles. He lit it at noon when searchers would be most likely to see it. The smoke column rose 400 feet, thick, white, unmistakable. But when the search and rescue helicopter passed overhead, it circled 3 miles south of Declan's position. The pilot saw the smoke. Declan was sure of it, but the helicopter didn't come closer. It moved on. Declan realized later what had happened. The searchers knew he was out here completing his merit badge test. They saw the smoke. They assumed it was his survival campfire, part of the test. They dismissed it as non-urgent. That mistake would haunt the search coordinator for months. But on Saturday, Declan didn't know any of that. He just watched the helicopter fly away and felt his stomach sink. He returned to his observation post. Travis was inside the cabin. Harper was still tied to the chair. Declan pulled out his signal mirror, a 3 by 3 inch piece of polished metal with a sighting hole in the center. Standard issue in every scout survival kit. He positioned himself on the ridge and began flashing SOS toward the highway 8 miles north. ... dash 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 ... 5-second pause. Repeat. He flashed for 90 minutes straight. His arm ached. His eyes burned from squinting through the sighting hole at the sun's reflection. Nobody responded. The rain started. October in the Blue Ridge Mountains is unpredictable. The forecast had called for a 40% chance of showers. What arrived instead was a cold, soaking storm that turned the forest floor into mud and dropped the temperature to 39 degrees. Declan's lean-to shelter, the one he'd built for his merit badge, kept him mostly dry, but he worried about Harper. The cabin's roof had holes. Water dripped through onto the floor. Through the window, Declan could see her shivering. Travis left the cabin again. Declan timed it. 30 minutes. Declan moved fast. He crawled under the cabin, emerged through the floorboard gap, and found Harper in worse shape than before. She was soaked. Her lips had a blue tint. Her whole body shook. Declan removed the gag. "You're hypothermic," he said. It wasn't a question. His wilderness first aid training had covered this. Blue lips, violent shivering, confusion. These were early signs. Harper tried to speak, but couldn't. Her teeth chattered too hard. Declan made a decision he knew would cost him later. He took off his fleece jacket, the one that had kept him warm through 2 nights in the forest, and draped it over Harper's shoulders. She couldn't put her arms through the sleeves because she was tied, but the warmth helped. She stopped shaking as much. He gave her his last granola bar, his last piece of jerky, most of his remaining water. "Move your fingers and toes," he told her. "Wiggle them. Keep blood flowing. Can you do that?" She nodded. It's Saturday evening. Declan said, "You've been here 24 hours. Tomorrow is Sunday." That's when he said, "Right. Sunday morning." "Yes." "Help is coming," Declan said. "I know it. My dad, he's a park ranger. He's out there searching. Your dad, he's out there. They're going to find you. And if they don't by tomorrow morning, I'm cutting you loose and we're running. I know how to navigate at night. We can make it to the trail. Deal." "Deal." Her voice was stronger now. "Declan. Thank you. If you weren't here, I'd be. You'd survive." Declan said, "You're tough. I can tell. But you're not alone. I promised I wouldn't leave. I keep my promises." He replaced the gag, slipped back under the cabin, disappeared into the woods. By the time Travis returned, Declan was back behind the log, shivering in the rain without his jacket, eating his last handful of trail mix. He had no food left, no warm layers. 41 hours remained before Travis's deadline, and Declan still hadn't slept. Sunday morning arrived with frost on the ground and desperation in Declan's chest. He'd slept maybe 4 hours total over the past 67 hours. His body was running on adrenaline and stubborn determination, and the kind of clarity that comes when a 12-year-old decides that keeping a promise matters more than his own comfort. He'd eaten the last of his trail mix Saturday night. His water was gone. His fleece jacket was wrapped around a girl he'd never met before Friday. And in approximately 17 hours, Travis Reed planned to kill his niece and bury her body somewhere in 500,000 acres of forest where she'd never be found. Declan had one advantage Travis didn't know about. Travis had never realized Declan was there. For 2.5 days, Declan had been invisible, a ghost moving through the forest like smoke, leaving markers, building fires, signaling for help, keeping Harper alive with smuggled food and water, and Travis had never once suspected that anyone was watching. He'd checked his perimeter. He'd set trap lines. He'd scanned the trees every time he left the cabin, but he'd never looked for a 12-year-old boy with a scout's training and a ranger's son's patience. That was about to change everything. Sunday, Declan made his way back to the ridge for the last time. His hands shook as he gathered wood, not from cold, though the temperature had dropped to 41 degrees overnight, but from exhaustion. His vision blurred at the edges. He'd read about this in his wilderness survival manual. Sleep deprivation, the body shutting down non-essential systems to preserve energy for critical functions. He had maybe 6 more hours before his judgment started failing. Maybe 12 before he collapsed entirely. He didn't need 12 hours. He needed 2. Declan built the biggest fire of his life. He used every technique his father had taught him. Started with a teepee structure, small kindling in the center, progressively larger sticks leaning inward. Added tinder made from dry pine needles and birch bark he'd kept in a waterproof bag. Struck his magnesium fire starter until sparks caught. Blew gently until flames took hold. Then he fed it. Dry oak branches for heat. Green pine boughs for smoke. Wet leaves for thickness. Moss torn from rocks still damp from yesterday's rain, creating dense white columns that billowed up and up and up. The smoke column rose 600 feet into the clear morning sky. Declan stood on the highest point of the ridge, arms raised above his head, waving. His bright orange rain jacket, the one piece of gear he'd kept on himself, stood out like a beacon against the autumn forest. He looked like a distress signal because that's exactly what he was. And this time, someone saw him. Captain Amelia Grant had been flying search and rescue missions for Asheville County for 11 years. She'd found lost hikers, crashed planes, missing children. She'd searched this forest dozens of times, and she knew what a normal campfire looked like versus what a signal fire looked like. This was a signal fire. "Command, this is Eagle 2. Her voice crackled over the radio. "I have visual on large smoke column. Coordinates approximately 35.354 north, 82.773 west. That's not a normal campfire. That's a signal fire." She banked the helicopter north, climbing to get a better view. Command, I also have mirror signal, SOS pattern, rhythmic, deliberate. Someone needs help up there. The radio crackled. Eagle 2, you're in Quadrant November, Echo 47. That's 3 miles outside primary search zone for the Reed girl. Copy that. But I've got a person on the ridge waving both arms, requesting permission to investigate. Permission granted. Proceed with caution. Captain Grant pushed the helicopter forward. 60 seconds later, she was hovering 200 feet above Declan Porter. Through her binoculars, she could see him clearly. A kid, maybe 12 or 13, wearing a khaki scout uniform shirt and an orange rain jacket, standing next to a fire that was putting out enough smoke to be visible from the next county. He was pointing down the slope northeast towards something she couldn't see through the tree canopy. Grant flipped to thermal imaging. Command, I have one heat signature on ridge. Appears to be young male scanning area now. She adjusted the camera angle, sweeping the forest below the ridge. There, Command. I've got a structure 400 meters northeast of the ridge. Looks like an old cabin. And I'm reading 2 heat signatures inside. Repeat, 2 heat signatures, one larger, one smaller. Static. Then a different voice. Male. Urgent. Eagle 2. This is Sergeant Donovan, Asheville PD. Can you confirm? 2 heat signatures. Confirmed. 1 adult-sized, 1 child-sized. 3 seconds of silence. Then all units. All units. Possible location of missing Reed girl. Coordinates 35.3547 north, 82.7729 west. Abandoned cabin. Air unit has confirmed 2 heat signatures inside. Ground teams converge immediately. Repeat. All teams. Converge on coordinates. Captain Grant looked down at the kid on the ridge again. He was still pointing, still waving. She keyed her mic. Command. The boy on the ridge. I think he's trying to tell us something. He's gesturing toward the cabin. Copy. Can you make contact? Grant dropped the helicopter lower, switching to the external loudspeaker. Hello, can you hear me? The boy's head snapped up. He nodded frantically. Are you Declan Porter? Another nod. Your father's been looking for you. Is there someone in that cabin who needs help? The boy didn't just nod this time. He held up both hands, fingers spread wide. Then he made a cutting motion across his throat, then pointed at the cabin again. The message was clear. Someone down there is in danger. Hurry! Grant radioed it in. Command. The boy is indicating immediate threat at the cabin. Recommend emergency response. Copy. Ground teams ETA 12 minutes. Hold position. 12 minutes. Grant watched the boy collapse to his knees, head in his hands, exhausted, relieved. He'd done it. Whatever he'd done, however long he'd been out here, he'd gotten help. Now it was up to the ground teams. Garrett Porter was 6 miles south when the radio call came through. He'd been searching for 40 hours straight. First, for Harper Reed, the missing 9-year-old whose father had called 911 Friday night, screaming that his daughter had been taken. Then, starting Saturday, when Declan hadn't shown up at the trailhead for his scheduled check-in, for his own son. Garrett had been torn between 2 kinds of fear. Professional fear, the kind that comes from 18 years as a park ranger, knowing exactly how many ways someone can die in these mountains. And parental fear, the kind that makes your hands shake when you imagine your child hurt, lost, alone. When the coordinates came through, when he heard boy on ridge and scout uniform, something in his chest unlocked. Declan was alive. And somehow, Garrett didn't understand how yet. Didn't have time to process it. Somehow, Declan had found the Reed girl. Garrett keyed his radio. This is Ranger Porter. That's my son on the ridge. I'm coming in from the south. ETA 10 minutes. He ran. Behind him, 7 other search team members followed. They crashed through underbrush, jumped over logs, navigated the rough terrain with the efficiency of people who'd spent their careers in these woods. At the same time, from the north, 14 Hell's Angels were converging. Brody Reed had assembled every brother within riding distance. The Asheville chapter, the Salem chapter 2 hours away. Independent riders who'd heard the call and dropped everything to help. They'd been searching in organized grid patterns since Friday night, coordinating with police and search and rescue, but operating on their own discipline, their own brotherhood code that said, when one of theirs is in trouble, you respond. Brody's group had been 3 miles northwest when the radio call came through. They moved fast, boots pounding dirt, leather jackets flashing between trees, men in their 40s and 50s running like they were 20 years younger because a little girl's life was at stake. From the east and west, police units closed in, 6 officers, weapons drawn, because the 911 call from Friday had mentioned kidnapping, and the helicopter had mentioned 2 heat signatures, and nobody knew yet what they were walking into. 28 people surrounded the cabin, and Travis Reed inside heard them coming. Travis had been sleeping when the helicopter passed overhead. The sound woke him, that distinctive thwop, thwop, thwop of rotor blades cutting air. He scrambled to the window, looked up through the canopy, and saw it. A search and rescue helicopter hovering. Not moving on, hovering. His stomach dropped. They'd found him. But how? This cabin was off every map. No trails led here. He'd been so careful. He'd checked for followers. He'd covered his tracks. The radio chatter started faint. Multiple voices. North side, south side. Travis ran to Harper, still tied to the chair, still gagged. Her eyes were wide with terror. Or hope. He couldn't tell. He grabbed her by the shoulders. "If they come in," he hissed. "If they try to take you, I'll kill you before they reach the door. You understand?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Travis pulled a knife from his pocket. A folding blade 4 inches lockback. He'd brought it for cutting rope. He held it up so she could see. "I swear to God, I'll—" Travis Reed. The voice came from outside, amplified, authoritative. "This is Asheville Police. Exit the cabin, with your hands up now." Travis's hands shook. He looked at the knife, at Harper, at the door. He'd planned this for 10 years. 10 years of imagining how Brody would feel when his daughter disappeared. 10 years of fantasizing about revenge. And now it was falling apart. "I have the girl," he shouted toward the door. "You come in. I kill her." Silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then a different sound. Boots on wood. Not from the door. From the side wall. The door exploded inward, not kicked, slammed. The old hinges gave way instantly. Brody Reed came through like a storm. 6'2" and 220 pounds of pure focused rage, and behind him 2 more men, 1 on each side. Travis tried to turn, tried to bring the knife toward Harper. He didn't make it. Brody hit him like a linebacker, drove him backward into the wall so hard the boards cracked. The knife fell. Travis's head bounced off the wood. Brody's hands were around his throat, lifting him, slamming him again. "That's my daughter," Brody said. His voice was low, deadly. "You touch her, you die." The other 2 men, one older, grey beard, arms like tree trunks, one younger, tattooed neck, face cold as stone, grabbed Travis's arms, wrenched them behind his back. Metal handcuffs clicked shut. Travis's face scraped the floor as they forced him down, his arms twisted at angles that made him gasp. Someone's knee drove into his spine. "Don't move," a voice said. "Don't breathe wrong. Don't give me a reason." Police poured in through the broken door. Weapons drawn, commands shouted. But the Hells Angels had already secured Travis, already neutralized the threat, and Brody was already at Harper's side. He pulled the gag from her mouth first. She gasped, coughed, sucked in air like she'd been underwater. "Daddy," she whispered. "I got you, baby." Brody's hands shook as he pulled out a pocket knife, his own, not Travis's, and cut the ropes around her wrists, around her ankles. The ropes fell away. Harper tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She'd been tied in that position for 67 hours. Her circulation was shot. Her muscles were cramped. She couldn't hold her own weight. Brody caught her, swept her into his arms like she weighed nothing. "I got you," he said again. "You're safe. I got you." Harper's arms went around his neck. She buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed. Huge, racking sobs that came from somewhere deep. Somewhere that had been holding terror for 3 days and could finally let it go. "Declan told me you'd come," she said between sobs. "Declan said you were looking for me. He promised. He kept me alive, Daddy. He gave me food and water. He talked to me. He promised." Brody froze. "Who's Declan?" A voice from the doorway answered. "Young, exhausted, shy. I am." Everyone turned. Declan Porter stood in the doorway. Tiny, 12 years old, 5'1" and 94 pounds, covered in mud and pine needles. His khaki scout uniform was torn at one elbow. His orange rain jacket was streaked with dirt. His eyes were red-rimmed from no sleep. His hands trembled. He looked like he might collapse at any moment. Harper's face lit up. "Declan." Brody stood slowly, still holding Harper, and turned to face this kid who'd somehow done what 165 trained searchers hadn't been able to do. "You're the scout," Brody said. Not a question, a statement. Understanding dawning. Declan nodded. "I was camping for my merit badge. I saw him take her Friday night. I followed him here. I couldn't get help fast enough, so I stayed. I left trail markers, broken branches, stacked rocks. I built signal fires. I brought her food and water every time he left. I tried to..." His voice broke. Exhaustion and emotion hitting him all at once. "I'm sorry I couldn't get her out sooner. I tried. I tried to signal earlier, but nobody saw. And I didn't want to leave her alone because what if he..." Brody held up one hand. "Stop." He stepped forward, knelt down so he was eye level with Declan, put both hands on the boy's shoulders. "Listen to me," Brody said. His voice was rough, raw. "You tracked a kidnapper. For 3 days you left trail markers that led us straight here. You kept my daughter alive. You didn't run to safety. You stayed when you could have left. You're 12 years old." Brody's voice cracked. "You saved her life. Do you understand me? You saved my daughter's life." Declan's face crumpled. The tears came. Adrenaline crash, exhaustion, relief, all of it hitting at once. "I promised her I wouldn't leave," he whispered. "Scouts keep their promises." Brody pulled him into a hug. This giant biker, arms like iron, holding this tiny kid like he was made of glass. "You're a brother now," Brody said quietly. "You understand? Hell's Angels. We protect our own. You protected mine. Your family." Behind them, Harper was crying again. Happy tears this time. And Garrett Porter, who'd just run the last 400 yards up from the trail and arrived in time to see his son being hugged by a Hell's Angel, felt something in his chest that was equal parts pride and terror, an overwhelming gratitude that his kid was alive. The helicopter medic reached Harper first. Her name was Elena Vargas. 15 years with search and rescue, seen everything. But when she assessed Harper Reed's condition, her face went tight. "Severe dehydration," she said, checking Harper's pulse, her skin elasticity, her capillary refill time. "Mild hypothermia, rope burns on wrists and ankles, psychological trauma. She needs IV fluids immediately and a hospital evaluation." She looked at Brody. "You got her just in time. Another 12 hours without water." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Brody's jaw clenched. He looked at Travis Reed, now face down on the cabin floor with 3 officers surrounding him, being read his Miranda rights. "Take care of my daughter," Brody said to Eleanor. "Please, I will." Eleanor turned to Declan. "You too, Scout. Let me check you out." Declan shook his head. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're exhausted and dehydrated and probably hypothermic yourself. When's the last time you ate?" "Last night. Trail mix. Before that, yesterday morning." "Jerky." Elena looked at Garrett Porter. "Your son gave most of his food and water to the victim, didn't he?" Garrett nodded slowly, the realization settling over him. "Yeah, he did." Elena checked Declan's vitals, pulse elevated, blood pressure low, core temperature 96.8 degrees, not critical but below normal, hands shaking from exhaustion. You need food, water, warmth, and sleep in that order. Hospital. Declan shook his head. Just let me sleep. Hospital, Garrett said firmly. Both of you. He looked at Brody. They can share a room if the hospital allows it. I think these two need to stick together for a while. Brody nodded. Agreed. The helicopter lifted off with Harper, Declan, Brody, and Garrett aboard. Elena stayed with them, monitoring IV fluids dripping into Harper's arm, making sure Declan drank water slowly so he didn't make himself sick. On the ground, police were processing the scene. Travis Reed was hauled to his feet, hands cuffed behind his back, 3 officers surrounding him. They walked him out of the cabin and toward the main trail where police vehicles were waiting. As they passed the first Hells Angel, Harlan Bear Lawson, the Asheville chapter president, 59 years old, arms crossed, face like granite, Travis made the mistake of speaking. This isn't over, he muttered. Brody thinks he won, but this isn't. Bear stepped forward, not threatening, just present. 6'4", 280 pounds, beard to his chest, eyes that had seen every kind of stupid the world had to offer. It is over, Bear said quietly. You're going to prison for kidnapping. A federal charge, felony assault, attempted murder, child endangerment. You're looking at 30 years minimum. Your brother's daughter is safe, and that 12-year-old you never knew was watching you. He beat you. A kid with a scout handbook beat you. Travis's face went pale. Bear leaned in slightly, voice dropping even lower. And if you ever get out, if you ever even think about coming near Harper or Brody or anyone in this family again, you won't deal with police. You'll deal with us. Every chapter from here to California knows your face now. You understand? Travis didn't respond. I asked if you understand. Yes. Good. The officers walked him away. Victor Judge Harlan, 54, ex-cop, the brother who handled legal coordination, watched them go. Then he turned to the rest of the assembled bikers and police officers. Textbook arrest, he said. Miranda rights read on scene. Multiple witnesses, physical evidence secured, no excessive force, no vigilante justice. He looked at Brody, who was already gone in the helicopter. Brody handled it exactly right. Immobilized the threat, protected the victim, let police make the arrest. One of the younger officers, couldn't have been more than 25, looked at Judge with something like awe. You guys, that was the most disciplined entry I've ever seen. Military precision. Judge nodded. That's what we train for. Control, discipline, protection, not chaos. Another officer, older, shook his head slowly. When we got the call Friday night, when we heard Hells Angels were mobilizing to search, some of us expected, well, not this. You expected violence, Bear said. Not a question. The officer nodded. We don't do violence for violence's sake, Bear said. We do what's necessary to protect people who can't protect themselves. Today, what was necessary was finding a little girl, securing a kidnapper, and making sure a 12-year-old hero didn't die of hypothermia in the woods. That's what we did. Now, you might be thinking, this is where I tell you the bikers rode off into the sunset. Credits roll, story over. But that's not how this works. Because justice, real justice, isn't just about the arrest. It's about what comes after. The charges against Travis Reed were filed Sunday afternoon, exactly 5 hours after his arrest. The prosecutor was a woman named Victoria Klein, 28 years in the district attorney's office, who'd handled every kind of case from petty theft to capital murder. When she reviewed the evidence, the cabin location, the rope marks on Harper's wrists, the ransom text, Travis's confession overheard by Declan, the 67-hour timeline, her face went cold. Felony kidnapping across state lines, she said, ticking off charges on her fingers. Federal charge, child endangerment resulting in bodily harm, attempted murder, extortion, assault, and we're adding something else. Her assistant looked up. What? We found documents in Travis's apartment, insurance policies. One on Harper taken out 3 weeks ago. $250,000 payout. Beneficiary listed as Travis Reed. The assistant's eyes widened. He was planning to kill her and collect. Yes, and here's the part that makes me sick. Victoria pulled another folder. We found an older policy, too, on Travis's ex-wife, Rebecca Reed. She died of what the death certificate listed as complications from pneumonia. The policy had paid out $180,000 to Travis 2 months after he'd taken it out. Silence in the office. He's done this before, the assistant whispered. He's done this before. So, we're charging him with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain, and we're reopening the investigation into Rebecca's death. If we can prove he killed his wife 8 years ago, we're looking at consecutive sentences. He'll die in prison. The bail hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. Victoria's recommendation was blunt. No bail, flight risk, danger to witnesses, pattern of violence, federal kidnapping charge. This man walks free. People die. The judge agreed. Bail denied. Travis Reed would await trial from a cell in the Buncombe County Detention Center. And given the evidence, given the witnesses, given the fact that he'd been caught in the act with a kidnapped child and a written ransom demand on his phone, the trial itself would be short. 3 days. That's how long it took. The jury deliberated for 97 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Federal charges carried mandatory minimums. State charges stacked on top. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd presided over family court for 20 years before criminal court, who'd seen what happened to children when systems failed them, looked at Travis Reed with something close to contempt. You kidnapped your own niece, she said. You held her captive for 67 hours with the intention of murdering her, regardless of whether ransom was paid. You traumatized a 9-year-old child who trusted you. You exploited family bonds for financial gain, and evidence suggests you did this before to your late wife. She paused. 35 years federal prison for kidnapping and extortion. 25 years state prison for attempted murder and child endangerment. Sentences to run concurrently. You will not be eligible for parole for 30 years. By the time you're released, if you live that long, you'll be 69 years old, and there will be a permanent restraining order preventing you from contacting Harper Reed, Brody Reed, or any member of their family. Travis's attorney started to speak. The judge held up one hand. I'm not finished. The court is also ordering full restitution to the victim for medical expenses, trauma counseling, and related costs. And I'm recommending that the state reopen the investigation into Rebecca Reed's death. If evidence supports prosecution, you'll face additional charges. She looked at Travis directly. You preyed on the most vulnerable person in your family. You failed, and now you'll spend the rest of your functional life in prison, thinking about how a 12-year-old boy outsmarted you. She banged the gavel. Court adjourned. But that was the legal ending. The real ending, the one that mattered to Harper and Declan and Brody, happened much earlier. It happened in a hospital room at Mission Hospital, Asheville, on Sunday afternoon, while Travis was being processed into jail. Harper and Declan shared a room. Not because the hospital required it, but because when the staff tried to separate them, Harper started crying, and Declan refused to leave her side. And Brody and Garrett looked at each other and said simultaneously, "Let them stay together." So they pushed 2 beds close, separated by a curtain they could pull back if privacy was needed, and let these 2 kids who'd survived 3 days of hell recover in the same space. Harper was hooked up to an IV. 2 bags of fluids dripped steadily into her arm, rehydrating her slowly so she didn't go into shock. Her wrists and ankles were bandaged where the ropes had cut into her skin. She wore a hospital gown that was too big, and someone, one of the nurses, had found a stuffed rabbit in the pediatric wing and given it to her. She clutched it like a lifeline. Declan was in the other bed, also on an IV, also being rehydrated. He'd refused food at first. His stomach was too tight, too knotted with leftover adrenaline, but eventually managed to eat half a turkey sandwich and some apple juice. The hospital had given him clean clothes. Someone from his scout troop had brought his duffel bag from home. He wore sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, Troop 47 across the chest. He'd slept for 6 hours straight, the deepest, hardest sleep of his life. When he woke up, the first thing he did was look over at Harper to make sure she was still there, still safe. She was awake, looking at him. "Hey," she said. "Hey, you kept your promise." Declan's throat tightened. "I said I would." "I know, but," she looked down at the stuffed rabbit. "I didn't think anyone would really stay. I thought you'd go get help and maybe they'd find me, but maybe they wouldn't and I'd be alone. But you stayed. You weren't alone." Declan said that was the promise, that you wouldn't be alone. Harper's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Thank you for not leaving me. Thank you for the food and the water and the jacket." She touched her shoulder where Declan's fleece had been draped. Someone had returned it to him, washed and folded. It sat on the chair next to his bed. "Thank you for telling me my dad would come. You were right." Declan nodded. "He'd go through fire for you. I could tell." "He did," Harper said softly. "He went through 3 days of not knowing where I was. That's worse than fire." The door opened. Brody Reed stepped in, followed by Garrett Porter. Both men looked exhausted. Brody from 67 hours of terror and searching. Garrett from 40 hours of searching for both Harper and his own son. But both wore expressions of relief so profound, it was almost painful to see. Brody went straight to Harper's bedside, checked her IV, adjusted her blanket, kissed her forehead. "How you feeling, baby?" "Better. Tired. My wrists hurt." "I know. The doctor said they'll heal. No permanent damage. Just needs time. And Declan gave me his jacket so I didn't get too cold. And his food. He gave me all his food." "Dad." Brody looked across at Declan. "I know, the medic told me." She said, "Without that, you'd have been in critical condition by the time we found you." He walked over to Declan's bed. Garrett was already there, one hand on his son's shoulder. Brody pulled a chair close and sat down. For a moment, he just looked at Declan. This kid who was 12 years old and small for his age and looked like a strong wind could knock him over. This kid who'd tracked a kidnapper through the forest and kept a hostage alive and built signal fires and left trail markers and never once thought about his own safety. Only about keeping a promise to a little girl he'd never met. "Declan," Brody said, "I need you to understand something. What you did, tracking Travis, staying with Harper, keeping her alive for 3 days, that wasn't luck. That wasn't coincidence. That was training and skill and courage. You made decisions that most adults couldn't make. You stayed when running would have been easier. You sacrificed your food, your warmth, your safety for someone else." He leaned forward. "In my world, in the Hells Angels, we have a code. We protect our own. We stand up when everyone else sits down. We do what needs to be done, even when it's hard. You did that. You lived that code. And you're not even one of us." Brody reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of leather. He unfolded it carefully. It was a vest, a miniature Hells Angels cut, kid-sized, with the winged death's head logo on the back and a patch on the front that said, "Honorary Member." "This doesn't make you a Hells Angel," Brody said. "You're 12. You've got your own path. But it means something. It means every brother in every chapter knows your name and knows what you did. It means if you ever need help anywhere in the country, you call us and we come. It means you're protected forever." He held it out. Declan stared at it. I can't take that. You can and you will, because you earned it." Declan looked at his father. Garrett nodded, eyes wet. "Take it, son. He's right. You earned it." Declan took the vest with shaking hands. He held it like it was made of glass. "Thank you," he whispered. "No," Brody said. "Thank you. You gave me my daughter back. There's no way to repay that, but we're going to try." 6 months later, on a warm April afternoon, Harper Reed turned 10 years old. The party was held at the Hells Angels clubhouse on the east side of Asheville, A nondescript building with a gravel parking lot and a painted sign that said, "Private Property." Inside, the main room had been transformed. Streamers hung from the ceiling, balloons clustered in corners. A table held a cake decorated with purple unicorns, Harper's favourite. 47 Hells Angels attended. Every member of the Asheville chapter. They wore their cuts, their patches, their leather and denim. They looked exactly like what they were. Rough, intimidating men with hard faces and harder histories. And they were celebrating a little girl's birthday like she was the most important person in the world, because to them she was. Harper wore a purple dress. Her hair was brushed and pulled back with clips. She smiled constantly, a real smile, not the careful, frightened expression she'd worn for weeks after the kidnapping. 6 months of therapy had helped. So had time. So had knowing that Travis was in prison for 35 years and would never hurt her again. But most of all, what had helped was feeling safe, surrounded by people who protected her, loved her, chose her. Declan was there too. Of course, he'd become a fixture in Harper's life over the past 6 months. He came to dinner at Brody's house every Sunday. He helped her with math homework, his best subject. He taught her basic wilderness skills, the same ones his father had taught him. How to build a fire, how to read a compass, how to tie knots. She called him her big brother. He didn't correct her. At the party, Declan wore the vest Brody had given him. He'd grown a little in 6 months, maybe an inch, maybe 5 pounds, but the vest still fit. He wore it over a button-down shirt, trying to look presentable, and stood near the cake table, looking slightly overwhelmed by all the bikers. Harlan Bear Lawson walked up, carrying a can of Coke in one massive hand. "You doing okay, kid?" Declan nodded. "Yes, sir. You don't have to call me sir. I work for a living." Bear grinned. "You want to know something?" "Sure. That vest you're wearing. We've given out exactly 3 honorary memberships in the 40-year history of this chapter. 1 to a cop who saved a brother's life during a shooting. 1 to a doctor who treated our guys for free when they couldn't afford hospital bills. And 1 to you." Declan's eyes widened. 3. That's it. That's it. Because we don't give that away. You have to earn it. And you did. You saved one of ours. That means something. That means everything. Bear put a hand on Declan's shoulder. "You're going to do great things, kid. I can tell. You're going to be the kind of man who stands up when it matters. The kind who keeps promises. The kind who protects people who can't protect themselves. And when you do those things, when you're older, when you're out in the world making it better, you remember that you learned how to do it when you were 12 in these woods alone, scared, and you did it anyway." Declan's throat closed up. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Bear squeezed his shoulder once, then walked away to refill the punch bowl. Brody appeared a moment later carrying a wrapped gift. "This is from the chapter," he said, handing it to Declan. "Open it." Declan tore the paper carefully. Inside was a frame. Behind the glass was Declan's scout handbook, the same waterproof notebook he'd carried for 3 days in the forest. The one where he'd written, "I found a kidnapped girl. Her uncle is going to kill her in 67 hours. I'm not leaving her." The page was opened to that entry, and below it, every member of the Asheville chapter had signed their road names. Bear, Reaper, Judge, Doc, Chain, Wrench, Ghost, Hammer. 47 signatures surrounding Declan's words. At the bottom, someone had added a line in careful handwriting. "A scout is trustworthy. This scout proved it. Asheville Hells Angels." "We're going to hang this in the clubhouse," Brody said, "right over the bar. So every brother who comes through here, every prospect, every guest, they see what you did. They see what real courage looks like." Declan stared at the frame, at his own handwriting from 6 months ago, at the signatures surrounding it. "I just did what I was supposed to do," he said quietly. "No," Brody said. "You did what most people can't do. That's the difference. That's why it matters." Across the room, Harper was laughing. Felix Patch Monroe, the combat medic who'd treated her at the cabin, was showing her a magic trick with a quarter, making it disappear and reappear behind her ear. She clapped and demanded he do it again. She looked happy, healthy, whole. Declan watched her and felt something settle in his chest, a kind of peace he hadn't realized he'd been missing. She was okay. That's what mattered. She was safe and loved and surrounded by people who would die before they let anyone hurt her again. He'd kept his promise. 3 months after that, Declan Porter received the Carnegie Hero Medal, a bronze medallion awarded for acts of civilian heroism. He was the youngest recipient in North Carolina history. He was a junior at Asheville High School, planning to study forestry at NC State. He still volunteers with the Stay Found Wilderness Safety Program. He still has dinner with Harper and Brody every Sunday. The Carnegie Hero Medal hangs in his bedroom next to his Eagle Scout certificate and the miniature Hells Angels vest. He doesn't talk about what he did very often. When people ask, he says, "I just did what anyone should do." But that's not true because most people wouldn't do it. Most people would run. Most people would choose safety over sacrifice. Declan chose differently, and because he did, Harper Reed is alive. She's 13 now, an 8th grader. She plays soccer and gets straight A's and wants to be a veterinarian. She volunteers with an organization that helps kidnapping victims recover and rebuild. She speaks at schools about resilience and trauma and healing. And every anniversary of the worst day of her life, and the best, she and Declan go back to the national forest together. They hike to the ridge where Declan built his final signal fire. They don't go to the cabin. They don't need to revisit that place. But they go to the ridge where hope happened, where a 12-year-old boy waved his arms at a helicopter and said, "She's down there. Please help her." They sit on the rocks and watch the sun come up over the mountains, and they don't talk much. They don't need to. The promise was kept. That's all that matters. If this story moved you, I want you to do something. Not just subscribe, though. Please do subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I want you to pay attention. There are Harpers everywhere. Kids who are hurting, kids who are scared, kids who need someone to notice, to ask the uncomfortable questions, to refuse to look away. There are Declans everywhere too. Kids who have more courage and character than most adults. Kids who are capable of extraordinary things if we teach them the skills and trust them with responsibility. And there are Brodies everywhere. People who look scary, who society tells us to avoid, who turn out to be exactly the protectors we need when everything falls apart. You don't need a motorcycle or a merit badge or 67 hours in the wilderness to make a difference. You just need to care enough to stay when leaving would be easier, to keep promises even when breaking them would be simpler, to do the right thing even when the right thing is hard. Declan was 12. If he can do it, so can you. So pay attention. Listen when a child hesitates. Ask the questions everyone else is too polite to ask. Care enough to intervene even if your voice shakes. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's a kid who needs someone to make the choice Declan made. To stay instead of run. To promise instead of turn away. To be brave when being brave is the only thing that matters. Be that person. And if you already are, if you're a teacher who notices, a neighbor who asks, a stranger who helps, thank you. Keep going. Keep caring. Keep being the person who stays. The world needs more Declans, more Brodies, more people who understand that protection isn't about size or strength. It's about showing up. It's about keeping promises. It's about refusing to let someone face darkness alone. That's the story. That's the lesson. And that's the promise. If we teach our kids to be competent, to be brave, to keep their word, they'll grow into adults who change the world one kept promise at a time. Subscribe to Gentle Bikers for more stories that prove heroes come in unexpected forms. Comment below and tell me who was your protector. Who taught you to keep promises? And who are you protecting now? Because everyone needs someone who won't leave. Everyone deserves their own Declan.